My world turned upside down last month. I never thought I'd be in this position, getting divorced at 31, living in a motel, and somehow becoming closer to my in-laws than my own wife. But life has a way of surprising you. I met my wife on Tinder 4 years ago. We clicked instantly and moved in together within a year. The proposal came naturally after that, and soon we were married. While my own family life had always been complicated, with parents who stayed together for the kids but made everyone miserable, my wife's parents were different. They ran a successful tech company but remained down to earth despite their wealth. My father-in-law and mother-in-law treated me like their own son from day one. They were warm, genuine people who made me feel like part of the family. My wife would often joke that they loved me more than her. We'd have Sunday dinners together, go on family trips, and share holidays. It felt like I finally had the family I'd always wanted. Then came the day that changed everything. My in-laws asked me to come over alone, saying they needed to discuss something important. I thought maybe they wanted to talk about a surprise party for my wife or some family business matter. Instead, they told me something that shattered my world. My wife was having an affair with a new employee at their company. He was 22, fresh out of college, and working in the department she managed. My in-laws had noticed them spending unusual amounts of time together. They'd asked her about it several times, concerned about both our marriage and potential workplace issues. She'd insisted they were just friends. Not convinced, they'd hired a private investigator. The evidence was clear. She'd been going to his apartment after work several times a week, telling me she was working late or out with friends. The investigator had photos, times, dates, everything. I broke down right there in their living room. These people who had become my second family held me as I cried, assuring me none of this was my fault. They let me stay the night because I couldn't face going home. The next morning, I confronted my wife before she left for work. At first, she denied everything, but when I showed her the photos of her car outside his apartment, she finally admitted it. She said it was just a fling because she was bored. Those words hurt more than the affair itself. She'd thrown away our marriage because she was bored. We had a huge fight. I told her to leave the house, but she refused, saying we could work things out. When she wouldn't go, I left instead. I just got in my car and drove until I ran low on gas, then checked into the first motel I found. I've been here ever since. My own parents were useless when I told them, just offering generic advice like, do what feels right. But my in-laws have been checking on me daily, making sure I'm okay, offering support and guidance. They're more concerned about my well-being than their own daughter's actions. Things got worse when I had to take time off work to deal with everything. My boss warned me I'd lose my job if I didn't return soon. When I mentioned this to my in-laws, they insisted I come over to discuss living arrangements with my wife. They suggested she could move back home with them so I could keep the house and my job. That's when things really exploded. My wife showed up with edited photos trying to prove I had cheated first, claiming she only had her affair as revenge. She had no idea her parents were the ones who had caught her. When they revealed this, she lost it, screaming about loyalty and storming out. That's when my in-laws dropped another bombshell. They wanted to make me their sole heir instead of her, cutting her out of their $2 million inheritance. They said she didn't deserve it after what she'd done. Now I'm torn. Taking that money would mean essentially taking my wife's inheritance. Even though she betrayed me, that's a life-changing amount of money to take from someone. My friends say I should accept it, especially after she tried to frame me for cheating. But I can't help wondering if it's the right thing to do. After talking with my closest friends, I started seeing things differently. My friend Marcus pointed out something important. Not only had my wife cheated, but she'd also tried to destroy my reputation with fake photos. If her parents hadn't known the truth, that lie could have worked. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was manipulative. That realization helped me make my decision about the inheritance. I called my in-laws and told them I'd accept their offer. They seemed relieved, but I could hear the sadness in their voices when they updated me about my wife. She'd quit her job at the company, the job she'd been preparing to take over one day. Both she and the guy she'd cheated with had stopped showing up to work immediately after our confrontation. My father-in-law was especially hurt by this. He'd spent years training her to run the company after his retirement. Now all those plans were ruined because she couldn't handle being caught. She'd also blocked her parents on everything: phone, email, social media. Complete radio silence. The contrast between my wife's behavior and her parents really struck me. Here were two successful people who could have easily covered up their daughter's affair or blamed me somehow. Instead, they chose to do what they thought was right, even though it meant possibly losing their only child. That kind of integrity is rare. I started visiting them more often, knowing they must be feeling lonely. We'd have dinner together, watch movies, or just talk. Sometimes we carefully avoided mentioning my wife, but other times we'd share our confusion and hurt about how things had turned out. They became my support system during the divorce proceedings. The mediation sessions were awkward. My wife would try to catch my eye, but I'd focus on the paperwork or the mediator. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved in with a guy from work. That stung, even though I knew it shouldn't. We'd been together for 4 years, married for 1, and she replaced me within weeks. The divorce process dragged on. My motel life was getting expensive, and I'd lost my job as expected. But my father-in-law came through again. He called an old friend who owned a consulting firm, and suddenly I had a better job with higher pay. When I tried to thank him, he just shrugged and said, "This is what family does." That's the weird part about all this. Through losing my wife, I somehow kept and strengthened my relationship with her parents. While she was off starting a new life with a 22-year-old, I was becoming closer to the people who raised her. They treated me more like a son than my own parents ever had. My in-laws decided to wait until after the divorce was final to change their will. They didn't want my wife to find out about the inheritance change until after they were gone. It wasn't about punishing her, they explained, but about rewarding loyalty and honesty. They said I'd shown those qualities while their daughter hadn't. One evening, after having dinner at their house, my mother-in-law showed me old family photos. She pointed to one of my wife at her college graduation and said, "I don't know where we went wrong with her." I didn't know what to say. How do you comfort parents who are grieving for a child who's still alive but has chosen to cut them off? The weeks turned into months. I found an apartment closer to my new job and started rebuilding my life. My in-laws helped me furnish it, ignoring my protest about spending more money on me. "We have to spend it on someone," my father-in-law joked, "and you're the only family we have left who's talking to us." Those words hit hard. Even through all the pain and betrayal of the divorce, I couldn't imagine cutting off my parents the way my wife had done. Sure, they weren't great parents, but completely blocking them out of my life? That seemed extreme. Yet here was my wife, doing exactly that to parents who had given her everything. Life has a way of settling into new patterns, even after everything falls apart. 6 months have passed since that day my in-laws told me about the affair. The divorce is almost final now. My new job keeps me busy, and I've made some work friends who don't know about my past. It's refreshing to be around people who just know me as me, not as the guy whose wife cheated. Last week, I ran into my wife at the grocery store. She was alone, and for a moment we just stared at each other across the produce section. She looked different, her hair was shorter, and she'd lost weight. She started walking toward me, but I just turned around and left my half-filled cart in the aisle. I wasn't ready to talk to her. Maybe I never would be. My father-in-law told me later that she'd broken up with a young guy. Apparently, the age gap was too much once the excitement wore off. She'd tried to get her job back at the company, but my father-in-law had refused. "Actions have consequences," he told her. Now she works at a smaller firm across town. The inheritance paperwork is ready. My in-laws met with their lawyer last month to make everything official. They told me over dinner one night, very matter-of-factly, like they were discussing the weather. I still feel strange about it sometimes, but they insist this is what they want. "Money should go to someone who values family," my mother-in-law said, "not someone who throws it away." My own parents finally showed some interest in my life when they heard about the inheritance. Suddenly, they wanted to have dinner more often and started calling regularly. I keep our conversations short. It's funny how money changes people, or maybe it just reveals who they really are. I've started dating again, very casually. My in-laws try not to react when I mention it, but I can tell they're happy I'm moving forward. They've become my family in a way I never expected. We still have Sunday dinners together, and they come over to my apartment for movie nights. Sometimes we talk about my wife, but mostly we don't. The pain is still there, but it's dulled now. Yesterday, my mother-in-law gave me a key to their house. For emergencies, she said, But we all knew it meant more than that. It meant I was still their son, even though I'm no longer their son-in-law. It meant that family isn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it's about loyalty, honesty, and being there for each other when things get tough. The money doesn't seem as important anymore. Yes, $2 million is life-changing, but what matters more is having people who choose to stand by you, even when it costs them something. My in-laws lost their daughter because they refused to cover up her lies. They lost their company's future leader because they valued truth over convenience. And somehow, in the middle of all that loss, they gained a son. My new apartment feels like home now. I've started cooking again, invited friends over, even adopted a cat. Life goes on, just differently than I'd planned. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about my wife, wondering if she regrets her choices. But those moments get rarer as time passes. The divorce papers came through this morning. As I signed them, I realized something. This whole mess taught me what real family means. It's not about sharing DNA or a last name. It's about the people who stand with you when they could just as easily walk away. My in-laws could have sided with their daughter, covered up her affair, kept everything quiet. Instead, they chose truth, knowing it would cost them dearly. So yes, I'm getting their inheritance. But the money isn't the real gift they've given me. The real gift is showing me what family should be: honest, supportive, and unconditional. Not the kind of unconditional that enables bad behavior, but the kind that loves you enough to tell you when you're wrong and stands by you when you're right. I'm still their son, even without the marriage. And maybe that's the biggest plot twist in this whole story. I lost a wife but kept the family. Sometimes the things that break your heart lead you to exactly where you're supposed to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.